Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We are about to deliver our third in a four-part webinar series. Today's webinar is covering the Adult Behavioral Health Home and Community-Based Services. This is really an introduction to Adult Behavioral Health HCBS in New York State and how these different services can be used to promote recovery. The content and slides today will be presented by different partners from the New York State Office of Mental Health and Office of Alcohol and Substance Abuse Services. Our partners will introduce themselves as they go through the slides. My name is Meg Beyer. I work for the McSilver Institute for Poverty Policy and Research, and I'm really excited to be delivering this third part of our webinar series today. As you can see, this webinar series has been a collaborative effort brought to you by multiple technical assistance training partners listed on the slide, as well as the different state partners who will introduce themselves, and the Office of Mental Health and Office of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Services. So again, I want to thank all of our partners who've contributed to this webinar, and thank you for joining us. And just as a reminder, today's webinar is really an overview of the new behavioral health home and community-based services that are available in New York State. Our hope in putting these together, not only this webinar, but all of the webinars in this series, is to really increase participants' understandings, whether you're a home and community-based service provider or a care manager, to understand how home and community-based services can really be used to promote recovery from behavioral health disorders. So for any additional information, we do want to encourage you to look at the provider manual that can be found at the website listed on the screen. And with that, I am going to pass it along to my colleague, Liam.
Thank you, Meg. My name is Liam McNabb with the Office of Mental Health. I'm the Director of Rehabilitation Services. And thank you, Meg. I, too, am excited about these new services. And as you've already stated, this presentation is to give everyone an overview of these new home and community-based services, which I think are will offer people the opportunity in a very flexible way to be engaged in ways they may not have ever had the chance to be engaged before, with the intent to pursue all of these important steps toward recovery. So next slide. As we walk through each of these individual services, we're going to, again, give highlights of the services and the staff that have been identified to deliver these services. But for more details, I, too, encourage everyone to spend some time with the HCBS Service Provider Manual to help you better understand the different staffing definitions and any questions you have about each of the services and where they can be delivered. So on this slide, we're going to talk about service location. Again, these are mobile rehabilitation services, and the intent of these services is to engage individuals who may be challenged or have been challenged to be engaged before, but also it's an opportunity for people to be engaged in ways they never have before, as we introduce these new rehab services in some parts of New York State where there have never been rehabilitation services before. All services should be provided in the location best suited to support the acquisition and restoring of skills. The person's preferences should be considered in making decisions regarding the service location. Being person-centered is a major principle of each of these home and community-based services, and they should occur in the home and community-based locations whenever possible. So we encourage, given the fact these are mobile rehabilitation services, they should occur in the most natural and best setting possible for someone to learn new skills in an effort to help them be a bit more independent in the community. And the note about CPST, which we'll talk a little bit more about shortly, is it must always be provided in a home and community-based setting. So that, as a specific service, cannot be delivered at an agency space or program space. Next slide, please. So voluntary participation, as I said, a major principle of these services is that they're person-centered. And participation in these services is voluntary. All services should support the individual's recovery and pursuit of their chosen life role goal identified in the plan of care. So again, we're talking about recovery, we're talking about being person-centered, we're talking about the individuals we serve identifying a goal, a life role goal that's meaningful to them, and this process should become more of a partnership with the people we serve so that they can pursue their life role goal by acquiring the necessary skills through the services that have been identified to help them pursue the life role goal. And that's where we need all of our partners in the provider community and health home care management community to work together to ensure that these people have an opportunity. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about the HCBS utilization thresholds, and there's 3 categories of utilization here. Tier 1 HCBS services are limited to $8,000 as a group. That's a set of services. And just please note there will also be a 25% corridor on this threshold that will allow plans to go up to $10,000 without a disallowance. So again, that's a cap for Tier 1 services of $8,000. And the second category of utilization threshold is $16,000, and that's a combination of Tier 1 and 2 grouping of HCBS services. And like the first category, the second category has a 25% corridor on this threshold as well that will allow plans to go up to $20,000 without a disallowance. So again, the second category, the overall cap is $16,000, but again, there's a 25% corridor that allows people to go up to $20,000 without a disallowance. And in the third category, there's a cap. Both Cap 1 and Cap 2 are exclusive of crisis respite. And the 2 crisis respite services, which we'll talk more about, are limited within their own individual caps, 7 days per year and 21 days, or per episode rather, and 21 days per year. We'll talk more about each of those services. But if a plan anticipates they will exceed any limit for clinical reasons, they should contact the HARP medical director from either the Office of Mental Health or Office of Alcohol Substance Abuse Services to get approval for a specific dollar increase above the limits that we reviewed. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to walk into each of these HCBS services and talk a little bit about what they are and what they look like. Next slide. So there's our overall menu of the home and community-based services. As you can see, they're all listed there. Psychosocial rehabilitation, followed by community psychiatric support and treatment, CPST. Habilitation, short-term crisis respite, intensive crisis respite. And then education support services is a service that is new to rehabilitation in many communities, and we're excited about promoting that and sharing information about that. And then today you'll hear about the 4 employment-related services, the employment support services, described a bit about how those are intended to be used and how they can help somebody advance toward their recovery. And then you have peer supports, another new service that is reimbursable for the first time in many settings and programs that will, again, be, I think, a valuable service and support to help people move toward their identified life role goals. And then you have family support and training, and then finally non-medical transportation. And on the next slide, we're going to proceed into psychosocial rehabilitation, PSR. So what is psychosocial rehabilitation? It's a service that assists the individual with compensating for or eliminating functional deficits and interpersonal and environmental barriers associated with their behavioral health condition. Again, this is substance abuse disorder and mental health barriers that have prevented somebody from being independent and in the community in many life role goals and roles that have escaped them due to their challenges. And the intent of this is to restore the individual's functional level to the fullest available. Again, from a rehabilitation perspective, the intent with this service is to restore the person's functional level to the fullest possible. And what does it look like? So PSR includes rehabilitation counseling focused on independent living, social relationships, community engagement, personal autonomy, health and wellness, and social skills, and personal care. It supports a person in learning adaptive behaviors for responding to or avoiding identified precursors such as cravings or triggers that result in relapse or functional impairment. Again, from a rehabilitation perspective and a recovery perspective, someone's life role goal may be related to having an apartment or a relationship or a volunteer opportunity in the community or a job. And barriers have been identified as a result of a mental illness or substance abuse disorder as preventing somebody from having those skills to achieve a specific life role. And PSR, like most other services in this HCBS manual, will help somebody learn the specific skills to overcome barriers related to the challenges as a result of their substance abuse disorder or mental health. Next slide, please. What else to know? What's important about PSR is it may be provided by unlicensed staff. It may be provided one-on-one or in groups. This is one of the 2 HCBS services that can be delivered in a group. And in this instance for PSR, since it can be delivered in a group, the service location may be within agency space or at an appropriate community location. HCBS services, as we've said, are mobile rehabilitation services and should occur in the most natural and most appropriate setting possible, and PSR specifically can be delivered one-on-one or in groups. And again, by unlicensed staff. So paraprofessionals in many settings haven't been able to deliver this type of service before. They have the skills and expertise and interest to do so, and this service will now allow them to do that. If a person receives both PSR and habilitation, then both services must be provided by the same agency. And again, that's one of those details that can be helpful to review in the service manual moving forward, as well as more about the definitions of each of the categories of staffing. Next slide. Community psychiatric support and treatment. So what is it? It's time limited, it's goal directed, and supports solution-focused interventions designed to help someone achieve stability and functional improvement. CPST is a mobile treatment and rehabilitation service intended to support a person or persons who have had difficulty engaging in site-based programs. It's intended, so CPST is intended to help someone, again, with mental health or substance abuse disorders be engaged in a more traditional type setting. And what does it look like on the ground? There are evidence-based interventions that will help support the person and their family in minimizing the negative effects and symptoms and environmental triggers. CPST assists the individual in identifying precursors or triggers that put them at risk, development of a crisis management plan, and support in identifying additional resources that a person may never have been exposed to before. It engages in a supportive counseling and solution-focused way and helps somebody identify areas to improve problem behavior and coping opportunities, and medication management when necessary is part of this as a mobile treatment service. And again, the outcome of CPST is to assist somebody in being engaged in a more traditional clinical treatment program for more consistent care and moving forward. Next slide, please. So what else should you know about CPST? Unlike PSR, this specific service must be provided by professional staff. And there's a list of titles that fall within this professional staff and the definition of professional staff in the services manual. And it must be provided in a home and community-based setting and not on-site, and this service must be delivered one-on-one. And it can be delivered to collaterals if and when it's appropriate and approved and supported by the individual, the participant. So again, this is a mobile clinic treatment service with the intent of engaging people in a more traditional clinical treatment setting for more consistent care moving forward. Next slide, please. Habilitation as a service is designed to assist individuals in acquiring, retaining, and improving the skills necessary for community living, and if applicable, to continue the process of recovery from a substance use disorder. It's different than PSR in that the skills taught are new to the individual. Under PSR, as a rehabilitation service, it's designed to help someone restore their skills, to use skills they've had before. And habilitation, which is new to many of our programs in our community, is around helping somebody acquire skills for the first time and skills they've never had before. And what does it look like on the ground? Part of the service are skill building exercises with a focus on functional status. Instruction in areas such as accessing community resources, use of transportation options, developing and sustaining financial stability, activities of daily living, and civic engagement. And it may include modeling, training, and supervision. It also includes hands-on skill training to help somebody learn skills related to activities of daily living. What else should you know about habilitation? Next slide. It may be provided by paraprofessional staff who are supervised by professionals. Again, a distinction from CPST as CPST is a more clinical service. It's provided one-on-one. If an individual receives both PSR and habilitation from the same agency, both services must be provided by that agency. Okay, and another note here is that this specific service was previously known as Habilitation, Residential Supports and Services, and is now called Habilitation. Next slide, please. So now we see the differences in one screen, and wanted to highlight the differences between PSR versus CPST versus habilitation. Again, PSR is the focus on restoring skills. Psychiatric rehabilitation comes into play here in those principles in many ways. And it may be provided by unlicensed staff, paraprofessional staff, and it may be provided one-on-one or in groups. And PSR may be provided on or off-site. And again, because PSR can be delivered in groups, it can be delivered in agency-owned space and other settings in the community as long as they're appropriate. CPST as a more clinically treatment-oriented service can only be delivered by professional staff. It's time-limited rehabilitation and treatment, again, intended to engage individuals in site-based programs in more traditional settings. It's only provided one-on-one, and it can only be provided off-site in the community, so off-site from an agency and agency-owned space. Habilitation, different than rehabilitation in that the focus is on acquiring and retaining new skills related to functioning. And it may be provided by unlicensed staff. It can only be provided one-on-one, and again, it may be provided on or off-site. Next slide. And I'll hand it off to Brenda.
Thank you, Liam, so much. My name is Brenda Harris Collins, and I work for New York State Office of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Services, and I work for the Practice Innovation and Care Management Division. And today I'm going to talk about family support and training, which is another service that is provided through home and community-based services. This family, one of the things that I begin to talk about when we mention family support and training that's important to know is that this particular service is geared to supporting the family member, the person that has the plan of care, and not the person who has the plan of care, and not specifically to the family member. The family member may have issues and concerns, but this is directed at the participant who has the plan of care. It is a service designed to facilitate and promote engagement and active participation of the family in the individual's recovery. And it's the person's preference of who they have voluntarily choose these services, and that person will say that this is a service that they value and that they want to be involved with. Through training and support interventions, they're able to help develop the family's capacity to support the individual and strengthen them as they become a partner in helping that person achieve their recovery. So this is a really important service, and again, we're excited about this service because it provides, the family is so key to a person's recovery process. What does it look like on the ground? One of the things that is important to know that what it looks like on the ground, and the key word for this particular service is training, that the family will be receiving some training. And each service that we're going to talk about has various components and that define how it looks on the ground. And for example, in family support and training, you have that you will see families being assisted in developing a safe and supportive environment for the individual. You see them having, being able to get help in providing interventions to develop and enhance the family's behavioral intervention strategies. There may be training and workshops on topics including recovery orientation, advocacy, psychoeducation, person-centeredness, trauma, psychiatric rehabilitation, crisis intervention, medication education, relapse prevention. You also may see that they have provided with family mediation and conflict resolution services. And again, we direct you back to the manual, the HCBS manual, because with each service that we've presented on today, this is just a brief synopsis of some of the components, but there are many more components that this particular service provides. But one of the things we wanted to also do today is give you an idea of what it would look like also on the ground and give you an example of how this may look for a particular person that is asking for this service. And so it may be a person named Laura who is a 44-year-old woman who has a long history of SUD use, substance use disorder with complications of diabetes, high blood pressure, and depression. And she may say that she's burnt a lot of bridges in her immediate family structure due to her substance use disorder, but she has a cousin and one of her children that still sticks right by her side. And she wants them involved in her recovery process and wants them to be helped in understanding what it is that she needs. Especially this particular person is on methadone, medication-assisted treatment, and they want the family to understand that because many times family members don't understand, and she wants to feel supported, and she needs them to assist in her relapse prevention plan as well. So one of the things that they will receive with this particular service is they will receive information and education on medication-assisted treatment. They will receive information on what triggers are and how they impact possibly those triggers. So it's important that this service be made available because many times family is critical to a person's recovery process. Next slide. What else should you know? One of the things that you should know about this service is definitely that this is the second service that may either be provided one-on-one or in groups. And so this, for group services, the service location may be within an agency space or an appropriate community space. And so it can be provided one-on-one again, and it can be provided in groups. So that's up to the person and what their needs are, and determining that the home and community-based provider will determine which meets their needs. Also, it's important for you to understand that family is defined by the person as their family of choice. So we don't define the family, they define who is a part of their family. And the person chosen must be reflected in the plan of care. And that person may include a parent, a spouse, a significant other, children, relatives, foster family, in-laws, whoever they determine is their family of choice. One note is to note that family does not include individuals who are employed to care for the participant. So whether it's residential staff or peer support staff or some home care person that has been hired to care for that participant, they cannot be included as family for this service. And this service may only be provided based upon the individual's preferences. So it's not what we define as family, again, but it's their preference, it's their say, and they voluntarily desire this. So we put them in the driver's seat when deciding on the services. They become important to driving what services that they get, and they request this as we are able to share with them what the service involves. Okay, and Liam, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Brenda. We're going to talk about the next two services which are related to a crisis. There are two interventions we're going to spend a little time on. We can't predict crisis. We can only respond to it in a way that keeps someone safe and healthy and in the community. And Short-term crisis respite is short-term, and it's provided in a site-based residential setting for individuals who are experiencing challenges in daily life that create risk for an escalation of symptoms that cannot be managed in the person's home or community environment. And there is an emphasis in this specific crisis service on peer support. So again, in this particular model, there's an emphasis on peer support as a way to help somebody at risk of escalation of symptoms. What does it look like on the ground? A short-term respite residence with support provided by certified peers. The interventions include on-site peer support, health and wellness coaching, relapse prevention planning, instruction in wellness activities and relaxation techniques, family support, conflict resolution, and problem solving. And the ongoing collaboration between the person being served, the respite provider, other providers, the care manager, the MCO, and the HARP and natural supports are critical to ensure that there's a safe plan of discharge for someone who is considered no longer at risk of an escalation of symptoms. And again, this is a place-based service with an emphasis on peer support. Next slide, please. So short-term crisis respite, what else is important is, in order for a person to participate in this service, a person is not required to have the New York State Community Mental Health Association or assessment, either the eligibility assessment or the full. So neither assessment needs to be completed for a person to access this service. Again, we can't predict crisis, we can only respond to it. And this service may be provided by an unlicensed behavioral health staff and, of course, certified peers. It occurs in a residence. It's staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when a person is in this particular service. And the person's engaged or encouraged to, continue to be engaged in work or their program. Could be a PROS or a continuing day treatment program or another program or service in the community while they are in the short-term crisis respite service. And the person must be voluntarily willing to stay at crisis respite. And while they may be at imminent risk for escalation of symptoms and or loss of adult role functioning, the individual must no longer pose an imminent risk to the safety of themselves or others. And next slide, please. So another service, separate service from short-term crisis respite, is intensive crisis respite. Again, another clinical intervention strategy for individuals who are facing a behavioral health crisis, including individuals who express suicidal or homicidal ideation and individuals who are at imminent risk for loss of functional abilities. This service is designed to provide supports to help the individual stabilize and return to the previous level of functioning or as a step down from inpatient hospitalization. Someone who is at serious risk of losing a life role would be a good candidate for intensive crisis respite. And what does it look like on the ground? It's a short-term residence, again, an on-site service with treatment and support provided by a multidisciplinary team, including professional, unlicensed, and peer support staff. It's a comprehensive assessment and evaluation. There's individual and group counseling included, and training and de-escalation strategies, relaxation techniques, and of course, relapse prevention. There's ongoing monitoring, and then family support, peer support, and conflict resolution. And as Brenda described in the previous service, engaging the family and other supports is critical to help somebody who is in crisis. And again, like short-term crisis respite, it's important for collaboration between the individual, the provider, other providers, the care manager, the MCO, HARP, and natural supports to ensure there's a safe plan for someone to transition out of intensive crisis respite into another setting. Next slide, please. So like short-term crisis respite, in order for an individual to participate in this service, the person is not required to have the assessment, either the eligibility or full, completed to be able to, again, participate in intensive crisis respite. Specific requirements for nursing and doctor coverage are outlined in the provider manual. The higher level staff required for this particular intervention strategy, given the level of risk that someone presents to be eligible for this service. The residence is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when there's a person in the service. And again, the person must voluntarily be willing to stay at the crisis respite. The individual must be able to contract for safety. And this particular service is available for up to 1 week per stay and must not exceed 21 days a year. And again, short-term crisis respite as a service and intensive crisis respite as a service are separate from the utilization thresholds that we covered earlier. Next slide, please. A side-by-side comparison of the two crisis services. Short-term crisis respite is intended for individuals who are experiencing challenges that create risk for an escalation of symptoms that cannot be managed while they're in the community. And they're encouraged to continue participation in work or program while they're in short-term crisis respite. And again, that's a site-based service with an emphasis on peer supports. An intensive crisis respite is for individuals who are in crisis, and that may include suicidal or homicidal ideation or experiencing an acute escalation of their mental health symptoms. And they're at imminent risk of losing functional abilities or a life role. And individuals do not attend work or other program while they're in intensive crisis respite. And it's provided by multidisciplinary team, which includes professional staff and unlicensed staff. And again, because of the higher level of the intervention strategy of intensive crisis respite, higher level staff are required to be available to provide this specific service. Next slide, please. Is this you, Angela?
No, this is Brenda.
Brenda, thank you.
Yes, thank you again, Liam. So, empowerment services, peer support. I know that you've heard Liam present services such as PSR that has peer support, and one of the short-term crisis respite that also has peer support. But this is a separate service by itself, and it has specific components. What is this particular service? This particular peer-delivered service is designed to promote skills for coping with and managing symptoms while facilitating the utilization of natural resources. Peer services should assist the individual in initiating and maintaining recovery and enhancing the quality of personal and family life in long-term recovery. And it is a person that has lived experience that is able to share and support the participant with that lived experience. So it is really something that helps individuals who may be struggling, but hearing it from somebody who has been there and done that is so effective in helping a person and helping them to navigate and initiate as well as maintain their recovery. What does it look like on the ground? Well, again, there are many components to this particular service, and the six categories of peer support components is advocacy, outreach and engagement, self-help tools, recovery supports, transitional supports, and pre-crisis and crisis supports. Advocacy has to do with things like helping a person develop a psychiatric advance directive, helping a person advocate for benefits and planning for benefits, helping an individual with shared decision-making plans that are necessary, outreach and engagement, talks about companionship and modeling of a recovery lifestyle so that it is modeled for them, self-help tools. We know that connection to self-help groups or to natural support, recovery supports deals with one-to-one peer support, recovery education and coaching for individuals, transitional supports deal with bringing a person, helping that person transition from one place to another. So for example, a person may bridge from jail or prison to back to home, and that peer may be able to help them as they transition from one place to another. and pre-crisis and crisis support. So this is very different than the short-term crisis and the intensive crisis, because we know that these are individuals who are delivering the services or unlicensed staff. They are not professional staff, but they can sit with the person. They know, because they've been through something, what a crisis may look like, and help to prevent, speak to the person, help them to navigate systems to get where they need to go to before a full-blown crisis, or be able to help them navigate a system that they have to navigate when they're in a crisis. Peers also work in a variety of settings. It could be in the community, it could be at the Respite program, it can be in wherever that setting is to meet that person where they are. It helps to promote hope and resiliency and to foster engagement and recovery-oriented life roles. Interventions that may be used include motivational interviewing, advocacy, benefits advisement, relapse prevention planning, connections to self-help groups again, and instruction in wellness self-management. So these are things that our peers can do to help another peer that has, so because of their life experience. It could be also someone like a person we're going to call Cindy, who is a female with 4 children that's living on her own, and Cindy has a history of alcoholism, bipolar disorder, anxiety. The children also have some issues and concerns, but most recently, Cindy has been experiencing some housing issues and concerns, and she has some landlord-tenant issues that are going on, and the peer is in place that can help this individual navigate that landlord-tenant court and help reduce some of the anxiety that that person may have. So many times we have peers and we've been giving them referrals, here, go there, but they don't, for them to be able to do it on their own, this person can actually go and help them to navigate, to get them back on track, because Cindy feels that if she can just get this taken care of, it would help to reduce some of her problems. A request is put in for a peer to help her navigate this. So this is a benefit to many who can just need some help, someone that they can share with that has that same life experience. Okay, next slide. What else should you know? Again, that this is a service that's provided one-on-one. This does not include groups. This is not a group service, but one-on-one service. And that participation in this service is voluntary, and activities should be structured and scheduled. So there is plans that peers work with the person. They come up with the specific activities that are geared to the components that they are going to address. And that's what's important about this service. And now I'm going to turn it over to Angela Lockhart.
Thanks, Brenda. My name is Angela Lockhart, and I'm the statewide coordinator of Rehabilitation and Employment Support Services for the New York State Office of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Services in the Division of Practice Innovation and Care Management with Brenda. Today I'm just going to give you an overview with some case samples of individual employment supports as well as individual education supports through the behavioral health, home and community-based services. There's 3 things that I would like to, for you to take away with in regards to this overview of this slide, is that the basic tenet of individual education and employment support services is that all individuals are capable of working in a competitive employment and in competitive employment in the community, even without prior training. And all individuals interested in employment should be given that opportunity. These services are not offered in a linear process. They are offered where the individual is in the continuum of his or her recovery and or their functional ability. Each of these services, education and employment services, offer effective learning practices and reinforce skills the individual has gained while engaged in the HCBS educational and employment services, as well as perhaps in the Access VR services. And there's more guidance coming out in regards to how an individual may participate in Access VR and the home and community-based services if they choose those services, but those services cannot be duplicative. Next slide, Meg, please. So let's first look at the educational support services. These services are needed to achieve skills necessary to obtain employment. The education services may consist of general adult basic education or applying for attending a college, a university, or a college certificate program. These services also may include classes, training, or tutoring. To pass a test, the task test, which used to be known as the GED, as well as support an individual who wants to participate in an apprentice program. There's the ongoing supported supported education services are offered after the individual has successfully been admitted into an education program. This ongoing education support is available for an indefinite period of time as it is needed by the individual to maintain their status as a registered student. Now please, as we've mentioned, Liam has mentioned and Brenda has mentioned, please look at the home and community-based manual, because in that manual there are service components that are specific to the individual that you may be working with and may apply, may individualize your services more for that individual. So let me give you a little case study for a young lady named Tammy. Tammy has a GED and her goal is to become a certified recovery peer advocate by enrolling in a certificate program at the local community college. Tammy's goal is to obtain employment at the recovery center in her community. Tammy may need these services outlined on the slide, as well as education services that are noted in the HCBS manual. One of them is learning how to navigate the educational training environment and being instructions on how to self-advocate for herself in an academic setting. These services can offer Tammy study skills and stress management, social skills that are necessary for the success in an educational environment. Next slide, please. Thank you, Meg. These are the individual employment services as side-by-side comparison. Again, these individual employment services, each one of them stands on their own and focuses on a skill set specific to the individual receiving the specific service. The individual employment services are person-centered, non-linear, and not designed to go in any specific order. These services are informed by the individual's preferences, their ability, their functional capacity, and their needs. As I mentioned in the overview slide, the Health Home Care Manager is responsible for providing the individual with information regarding the education and employment services also offered by Access VR. This information regarding the referral must be presented within the context of making an informed choice. And specific guidance regarding Access VR and home and community-based employment support services are forthcoming. So be advised that the individual can receive employment support services for both the behavioral health services and Access VR as long as these services are not duplicative. Thanks. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with the first one, pre-vocational services. And I'm going to start off with a case study by a person by the name of Jeremy. Jeremy reports that he attended special education classes and never attended high school. He wants a job at the Salvation Army thrift shop where his friend Jackson works. Now, the Health Home Care Manager will share with Jeremy that pre-vocational support services will generally be provided if Jeremy decides that these are the services best for him. These services will be provided to help Jeremy develop general, non-job specific strengths and soft skills to contribute his becoming employable. These services can include work at a workstation. Jeremy may work or have other related experience, such as being a volunteer or doing internship in the community. The Salvation Army may also be open to offering that type of pre-vocational employment opportunity, and Jeremy's home and community-based employment specialist may help him with setting up that kind of arrangement on Jeremy's behalf. So he can explore job and career options, also look at benefit counseling. He will be involved in coordinated schedule activities, and this could include, again, internships or being in a volunteer work experience. That will strengthen his work experiences. Next slide, please. Transitional employment. Now we look at transitional employment support services, and be advised that OASAS offers these support services differently from OMH PRO's program. Even though the services themselves are the same, the approach may be different. And Liam may want to speak a little on that, but I didn't tell him before so if you want to, Liam, you're more than welcome to jump in.
Do you want me to talk about the guidance?
Sure, yeah. Go ahead.
You go ahead. Go ahead, Angela.
I was just wondering, did you want to talk about the guidance in regards to Access VR, or the difference between the OASAS PRO's approach in regards to transitional employment?
I can talk about the guidance that you mentioned regarding Access VR is forthcoming, and thanks to you and your colleagues at OASAS and us and Access VR, we've came to an agreement for a very person-centered approach to allowing somebody to access those services that are non-duplicative. But that's forthcoming, and I think, as you said, Angela, this is a real opportunity for people to pursue other avenues of support beyond our traditional programs at OMH and OASAS, and they can now access supports and other perhaps funding opportunities available through Access VR.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liam. In transitional employment supports, the skill training is specific to transitional employment, may also include but is not limited to attention that is paid to appropriate dress, hygiene, walking or talking with others in a professional, educational, or employment environment, making eye contact, money management, and dealing with outstanding warrants or legal or incarceration history. So let me talk a little bit about Katie. Katie has worked in odd jobs for neighbors, families, and small businesses in her community, but she has never worked in a competitive work environment making a minimum wage. Katie likes to read in the library and heard about a program the library offered to work stacking library books. And Katie has mentioned to her health home care manager that she would like to go to work in this library program, but she's fearful about working a regular job. So in this case, in the last bullet on the slide, Katie may work with her HCBS employment specialist with adopting an identity as a worker and accepting responsibility for her decisions in the job, as well as potential for transferable skills that she may have learned even when she was working with the neighbors or other family members or in the small businesses within her community. So transitional employment can offer Katie this kind of experience. Next slide, please. Now we look at intensive supported employment. What is it? This service is designed to support individuals in obtaining and sustaining competitive employment in an integrated employment environment using evidence-based employment practices. What does this look like on the ground? Let's say if Katie gets that library position via transitional support services and resumes and reaches her time limit with transitional support services, she may benefit with continued intensive supported employment. But let's say another individual, Ruth, decided with the assistance of her health home care manager that she wanted a job right away, and she didn't want to go into transitional services, and that is her choice. And she and her home community-based specialists were able to get her a job, making a minimum wage at Target with the help of her mother's friend. Now, Ruth has a history of being challenged by authority figures and managing her anger, and she's afraid that she's going to lose her new job. So the intensive supported employment, they did a rapid job search. She's going to need some job coaching. Also, because she may be receiving benefits counseling, how her benefits will change as a result of working, but also, as noted in the last slide, skills that are related to managing her behavioral health behaviors in the workplace, such as coping skills, training or problem-solving skills training, anger management, and how to interact with interpersonal communications. Her HCBS employment specialist will work with her intensively to manage these characteristics and or behaviors. Next slide. Ongoing supported employment. Tony is in recovery and has maintained a job as a waiter for several years, even though this job does not pay well. He has been offered a position to manage the restaurant at higher pay and with benefits. Tony is grateful for the opportunity, but he is fearful that he may relapse with the higher pay and more money and having to have more responsibility. Tony is seeking ongoing intensive employment support to keep his job. So what is this going to look like? On-the-job support also includes job training and training in soft skills as necessary. But Tony may not need those soft skills, and that he has been working in this specific site for a long time alongside the continuum of his recovery. So his employment specialist will teach him practice skills necessary for establishing workplace relationships and increased time management, understanding his supervisory role and expectation, and accessing workplace supports, which may be out in the community, where these services may be offered to Tony. Remember, the individual receiving ongoing employment support, all employment supports, that's pre-vocational, transitional, intensive, and ongoing, these individuals must be paid at or above the minimum wage and receive the same level of benefits paid by the employer for the same or similar work done by other workers. The outcome of all supported employment activity is documented in the participant stated career objective and career plan, and is used as a guide in the employment support of this individual. So I thank you for allowing me to share with you the individual employment support services and the education support service, and I'm going to now turn it back over to you, Liam.
Thank you, Angela. We're going to talk about non-medical transportation as part of this menu. And non-medical transportation is a service available for individuals to access authorized home and community-based services and destinations that are related to their self-identified meaningful life role goal included on their plan of care. And what does it look like? Transportation to non-routine locations in the community that support the acquisition of, again, their self-identified goal. Transportation may be in the form of a cab or taxi, a reimbursement for public transportation, or reimbursement for transportation provided by natural supports. And some examples we have here for this particular service include transportation to job interviews, college fairs, wellness seminars, work, or school orientation, recovery workshops, etc. Again, the intent of this as a service, non-medical transportation, is for a need that I would describe as not being consistent. So the job fair, I think, is a good example of an opportunity for someone to take advantage of this service as opposed to consistent transportation to and from a job. A job fair may be part of the work someone's doing, is one of the services that Angela described earlier to attain and keep a job. But this particular service would not be used to help somebody to a consistent place for a consistent reason. Next slide, please. What else is important to know about non-medical transportation? It's intended to help the person initiate a new activity rather than maintain an existing one. Again, an inconsistent need is how I would describe it. Any reoccurring activities must be detailed in the plan of care, but must be related to the person's goal. The care manager must complete a justification for the service within the plan of care, again, the person's plan of care. Trips are coordinated by the care manager and the managed care organization, who will forward authorized trips to the transportation manager. There's a linkage process here to ensure that this is available, and there's a limit to this specific service, $2,000 per calendar year, although trips to behavioral health HCBS and trips using public transportation are not included in that cost cap. But again, another opportunity that is included on this home and community-based menu of services that individuals can now take advantage of from an engagement perspective and an opportunity for skill development. So thank you for your time and attention. Thank you to OASAS, and I'll hand it back over to Meg, please.
All right. Well, thank you, Liam and Angela and Brenda, for walking us through those slides on our webinar today. I want to thank everyone who might have tuned in or logged on to this recording. If you do have any questions, I just wanted to remind everyone there is a link on slide 3 to the Adult Behavioral Health HCBS Provider Manual. So any detailed questions related to the services, we would direct you there. But if you have any questions, we did want to list these 2 email addresses. One is for OMH providers and one is for OASAS providers. So if you have any specific questions, we would encourage you to directly send them to these email addresses that are currently on the slide. And also to stay tuned for our 4th and final webinar in this series, which will be coming out shortly and really is based around putting all of these different services into context, both the mental health and substance use disorder treatment and rehab services, as well as the adult behavioral health services that we've talked about today, the home and community-based services, and how to really put them together to really support someone in their journey of recovery and rehabilitation. So I want to thank again all of our presenters and our technical assistance partners who helped to develop these slides in the webinar. And if you have any questions, please direct them to the email, and we hope to hear and talk to you soon. Thanks so much.